Have you ever opened your pantry, looked at everything stacked inside, and thought, yeah, I'm ready? Rows of canned goods, bags of rice, a few boxes of pasta sitting in the corner. Maybe some canned soup you bought during a sale 6 months ago. It feels good. It feels responsible. It feels like you've done something most of your neighbors haven't bothered to do. But here's the uncomfortable truth that most people never stop long enough to actually think about. A full shelf doesn't mean a functional pantry. There is a very real difference between food that fills a shelf and food that actually works when things fall apart. When the power goes out for 3 days, when the grocery store shelves are picked clean, when the water supply becomes unreliable, when your kids are hungry and everyone in the house is stressed. Does what you have actually help? Does it translate into real meals? Or does it just sit there looking reassuring? Beginners stock up to feel ready. Smart preppers stock up to plug gaps. And those are two completely different approaches that lead to two completely different outcomes when it actually matters. Some of the most important gaps in a prepper's pantry aren't what you'd expect. They're not always about calories or shelf life or volume. Sometimes the gap is flavor. Sometimes it's texture. Sometimes it's a food that requires no cooking when cooking is impossible. So let's talk about the foods that actually matter. The ones experienced preppers grab early, and the ones most people never think about until they're standing in a disrupted kitchen wishing they had. 14. Salt. The one thing that makes everything else worth eating. Before we even get into the main items, let's talk about something almost embarrassingly basic. Salt. Most people have a container of salt in the kitchen already, a shaker on the dining table, maybe a box near the stove. So when salt comes up in a preparedness conversation, people tend to brush past it. Of course I have salt, but here's the real question. Is it enough? And is it actually stored properly? Salt does something no other pantry item can replicate. It makes food edible in the long run. Plain rice without salt is tolerable once. Twice it gets old. After 4 days of plain rice with no salt, it becomes something people start refusing to eat. Beans, pasta, oats, broth. Every single base food in a prepper's pantry depends on salt to become something a person actually wants to finish. The mistake people make is assuming the salt shaker on the dining table counts as emergency prep. It doesn't. That shaker might hold enough for 2 or 3 weeks of very light normal use. But in a disruption where you're cooking everything from scratch, no takeout, no restaurants, no convenience food, no frozen meals, you burn through salt faster than almost anyone anticipates. Smart preppers keep a separate sealed container of salt that never gets touched during regular life. Not the fancy Himalayan pink salt, not specialty sea salt with expensive packaging. Just plain iodized table salt or kosher salt in a large sealed bag or airtight container. Salt stores indefinitely when kept completely dry. It weighs almost nothing and costs almost nothing. And without it, the rest of your carefully assembled pantry becomes dramatically harder to eat. Buy more than you think you need. Store it separately, and never count what's already open in the kitchen as part of your backup supply. 13. White rice. But not for the reason you think everyone buys rice. It has practically become a cultural joke at this point. The moment a storm warning gets announced, the rice aisle clears out faster than almost any other section of the grocery store. People grab bags of rice instinctively, almost without thinking, and feel like they've done the important thing. But most people buy rice without thinking carefully about what rice actually is and what it isn't. Rice is a base. It is not a meal on its own. And that distinction between a base food and a complete food is the key insight that separates beginner prepping from genuinely smart prepping. White rice stores longer than brown rice. Brown rice contains natural oils in the bran layer that go rancid over time, sometimes in as little as 6 months if conditions aren't perfect. White rice, kept sealed in an airtight container, away from moisture and pests, can last many years without significant quality loss. That part most people know or have heard somewhere. What most people don't think about is that rice alone will emotionally and psychologically exhaust a family within days. Not physically, or it keeps you full. It has calories, it provides energy. But mentally, emotionally, and in terms of appetite and morale, eating plain rice for every meal breaks people down faster than almost any other experience during a disruption. There's a reason armies, historically, paid enormous attention to food variety. Morale collapses when food becomes monotonous. And a household is no different from an army in that regard. Rice matters enormously in a disruption pantry, but it matters because it stretches everything else. A single can of sardines becomes a genuinely satisfying full meal when there's a bowl of rice underneath it. A spoonful of peanut butter on the side of a rice bowl suddenly adds enough fat and richness to feel substantial. Red lentils cooked directly into rice creates something closer to a complete dish with actual depth. Buy rice. Buy a meaningful amount of it. But buy it knowing it is the canvas, not the painting. Everything else on this list is the painting. 12 canned beans, your first 48 hours safety net. Now we get into the core list. And the first real item is canned beans, not dry beans, canned beans. And yes, that distinction matters enormously. Here's where a lot of people make a mistake they don't even realize they're making. They buy dry beans, pounds and pounds of dry beans, black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans. Bag after bag stacked on the shelf. The pantry looks full, it looks stocked, and they feel prepared because of how it looks. But here's a question worth sitting with. If the power went out tonight, right now, and you needed to feed your family in the next 60 minutes, what good is that bag of dry beans? Dry beans need to be soaked. That process takes hours, often overnight. Then they need to be boiled, which takes more hours, sometimes 2 to 3 hours of steady cooking. All of that requires a significant amount of water, a fuel source that can sustain prolonged cooking, and a kitchen setup that is actually functional. None of which you necessarily have in the first 24 to 48 hours of a real disruption, when everything is still chaotic and unsettled. That's the exact role canned beans are designed to fill. They're already fully cooked. Open the can and the food is there. Ready. You can eat them cold if the situation requires it. You can heat them quickly over a small flame. You can mix them into rice, stir them into a simple soup, combine them with canned vegetables and some bouillon powder, and have a meal that took 10 minutes instead of 3 hours. Canned beans are not competing with dry beans. They serve a completely different moment in a disruption timeline. Dry beans are for the long haul, for the weeks after things have stabilized enough that you have time, water, and fuel to cook properly. Canned beans are for the early, messy, chaotic hours when you simply need to feed people right now without burning resources you might desperately need later. The first few days of any disruption are almost always the most disorganized. People are anxious, normal routines have collapsed, children are asking questions that don't have good answers. Older adults need to eat on schedule for health reasons. Everyone is burning emotional energy just managing the situation. Having food that requires almost no preparation during that critical window is not a small convenience. It's a meaningful strategic advantage that takes pressure off an already difficult situation. 11. Sardines and canned fish packed in oil. Picture a pantry that looks genuinely solid by almost any standard. A full shelf of rice, pasta in multiple varieties, canned soup in a dozen flavors, beans, oats, crackers, peanut butter. It looks like a lot of food. It looks like someone did their homework. But spend 3 days eating from that pantry during an actual disruption, and something becomes very obvious very quickly. Everything is starchy. Everything is heavy in a specific way. Everything is dry. And despite eating enough to feel full, there is a persistent, nagging sense of being unsatisfied. The body is full, but not nourished in the way it expects. That is the fat problem, and it is one of the most overlooked gaps in a beginner's pantry. Canned fish packed in oil solves it directly and inexpensively. A small can of sardines, the kind you can pick up for $1 or $2 at any grocery store, delivers roughly 180 to 220 calories per can and more than 20 grams of protein. That's already meaningful, but more importantly, it brings fat, real satisfying dietary fat from the oil it's packed in. And fat is what the body needs to feel genuinely fed rather than merely topped off. Place sardines over plain white rice and let the oil soak down into the grains. That bowl stops being emergency food and starts being a real meal. Something a person actually wants to eat rather than forces themselves through. Add sardines to crackers with a little salt and vinegar on the side. Suddenly there is texture, richness, protein, and flavor in a combination that requires no cooking whatsoever. Canned fish packed in oil makes every other base food in the pantry work harder and feel more satisfying. Rice becomes more filling. Pasta gains a natural flavor center. A can of beans goes from feeling like a side dish to something approaching a complete main course. The oil itself is not waste. It flavors everything it touches. Water-packed tuna is fine and has its place, particularly for people who prefer a milder flavor. But if you're choosing between the two formats for a disruption pantry, oil-packed fish wins on almost every measure. The oil is part of the nutrition. It's not packaging liquid to be drained away. It's food. The biggest mistake people make is building a pantry full of dry starches and grains and calling it done. It isn't done until there is something in there with ready-to-eat fat and protein that requires no cooking, no soaking, and no setup. 10. Whole milk powder. Most people don't think seriously about milk until the refrigerator is warm and the last carton has already turned. Fresh milk is so automatic, so embedded in the daily routine, that almost nobody thinks of it as something that needs a backup plan. But fresh milk is one of the first things that becomes unavailable in any meaningful disruption. A power outage of more than a few hours compromises refrigeration. A supply chain disruption empties dairy shelves faster than almost any other category. And once it's gone, the absence is more disruptive to daily meals than most people anticipate. The loss of milk doesn't just affect drinking. It affects oatmeal, which becomes thin and bleak without it. It affects hot drinks, which feel less comforting. It affects any simple baked item that uses milk for moisture. It affects the quality of breakfast for children in particular, who are often already struggling to adjust to a disrupted routine. Whole milk powder is the answer, not non-fat milk powder, though that option exists and some people prefer it for shelf life reasons. Whole milk powder contains the fat that makes milk feel satisfying and complete. Non-fat powder works in some applications but produces a thin, slightly watery result that doesn't truly substitute for the richness of real milk. What experienced preppers do differently is they don't just buy whole milk powder and leave it on the shelf for emergencies. They rotate it actively. They add a scoop to morning oats. They use it in coffee or tea on weekday mornings. They cook with it occasionally. That keeps the container moving, keeps the product fresh, and, critically, means the family is already used to the taste and doesn't experience it as an unpleasant change during a stressful time. Store it sealed in a cool and consistently dry location, away from anything strongly scented. Milk powder absorbs ambient odors with surprising efficiency. A tight-lid container in a pantry corner away from spices and cleaning products is ideal. 9. Red lentils. Stand in front of the dry legumes section at any well-stocked grocery store. The variety is almost overwhelming. Pinto beans, navy beans, black beans, chickpeas, green lentils, brown lentils, great northern beans. Most people reach for whatever they recognize from previous shopping trips and move on without giving it much thought. But here's the detail that changes everything. Most of those familiar beans take a very long time to cook. Chickpeas can take 2 to 3 hours of boiling even after soaking. Many dry beans require 8 or more hours of soaking just to be ready to cook. And in a disruption scenario where you're managing a limited camp stove fuel canister, rationing water carefully, and trying to feed hungry people without burning unnecessary resources, cooking time is not just an inconvenience, it is a real cost. Red lentils solve that problem more elegantly than almost any other dry legume. They require no soaking whatsoever. They cook fully in 15 to 25 minutes over modest heat. That is a dramatically different proposition than a bag of dry kidney beans that needs overnight soaking plus 2 hours of boiling before it produces anything edible. Red lentils also have an unusually forgiving texture when cooked. They break down easily and naturally, which means they integrate into soups, stews, and savory porridges without requiring careful timing or precise technique. In a high-stress cooking situation where you're managing multiple things at once, that matters. Add red lentils to rice and cook them together for a more substantial, protein-enriched one-pot meal. Add them to broth with bouillon powder, a few pieces of rehydrated dried mushroom, and whatever canned vegetables you have. And you have something genuinely satisfying with actual depth of flavor. They don't need to star in a meal. They just need to make the meal more complete. The framework to remember is simple. Canned beans for the first 48 chaotic hours when you need food immediately. Red lentils once things settle enough to have a small stove going for 20 minutes. Dry beans for the longer-term stable period when conditions allow proper cooking. Each one has its moment. Most preppers only buy one of the three. 8. Rolled oats. Not instant oatmeal. Rolled oats specifically, and the difference is more significant than it might appear. Instant oatmeal packets come pre-flavored. Apple cinnamon, maple brown sugar, berries and cream. Each packet is designed to be one specific thing and only that thing. On a normal busy morning, that's convenient. Pour in hot water, stir, eat, move on. Nobody complains. But after 5 consecutive mornings of the same sweet-flavored oatmeal in a disruption scenario, the fixed flavor profile becomes a genuine problem. There is nowhere to go. You cannot make it savory. You cannot adjust it significantly. You are locked into the original formulation, and when people are already feeling the stress of an abnormal situation, food monotony compounds that stress in ways that are hard to overstate. Rolled oats are completely neutral. That is precisely the point. They can go in any direction the situation calls for. Cook them with whole milk powder and a small amount of honey for a warm, filling, genuinely comforting breakfast. Add a spoonful of peanut butter to increase the fat content and make the meal last longer before hunger returns. If you need something savory, and after a few days, many people genuinely do crave savory over sweet, cook rolled oats into a thicker porridge with bouillon powder and top them with canned fish. It sounds strange until you've actually tried it. Then it makes complete sense. Rolled oats also function as a thickening agent for other foods. A soup that's too thin and watery gets body and substance from a small handful of oats stirred in. A stew that lacks enough texture becomes more filling and satisfying. They are quietly one of the most versatile base foods in a well-assembled disruption pantry, precisely because they support and improve other foods as much as they stand on their own. Store them in a sealed container. Oats attract moisture and insects if left in an open bag. A properly sealed container keeps them usable and fresh for a meaningful period. 7. Peanut butter. There's a reason peanut butter appears on nearly every credible preparedness list ever written. It's not tradition or habit. It's pure practicality, and it holds up under scrutiny every single time. Peanut butter is calorie-dense, rich in fat, and completely ready to eat with zero preparation of any kind. No water, no stove, no pot, no soaking, no waiting, no heat source required. Open the jar and the food is immediately there, usable in any condition, at any time of day or night. In a pantry that mostly contains foods requiring some level of cooking or setup, peanut butter is the reliable outlier that works regardless of circumstances. Think honestly about what a day without power actually looks like in practice. The kitchen is not running normally. The routine that structures everyone's day has disappeared. Children are hungry at inconvenient and unpredictable times, not just at scheduled meal times. Adults are managing multiple stressors simultaneously and don't want to deal with another cooking task on top of everything else. The emotional bandwidth for food preparation is lower than it normally would be. Peanut butter doesn't ask anything of you. Spread it on crackers and you have a snack with real substance. Eat it alongside a bowl of rice to add fat and richness to a meal that would otherwise feel light. Stir it into rolled oats for a more filling breakfast. Hand a small spoonful directly to a child who needs something right now without any ceremony or setup. Peanut butter adds fat and sustained energy to dry, starchy foods, which is exactly what most disruption pantries contain too much of. The common mistake is buying one large jar, putting it on the shelf with good intentions, and then forgetting about it for a year. Peanut butter does have a shelf life. The oil eventually separates, the surface can dry out, and if it's been sitting untouched for 14 months, you genuinely don't know what condition it's actually in when you finally need it. Buy what your family already genuinely likes and eats. Rotate it. Use it in everyday meals so the jar keeps moving and stays fresh. If anyone in the household has a peanut allergy, sunflower seed butter or almond butter serve essentially the same function without the allergen risk. 6. Bouillon powder and seasoning cubes. Here is a scenario that plays out with uncomfortable regularity in real emergency situations. The pantry is still meaningfully stocked. There is rice, there are beans, there's pasta, there are oats. From a purely caloric standpoint, there is enough food, but people are eating less than they should. The person doing the cooking has quietly stopped trying to make meals interesting. Children are refusing food or eating only small amounts. Adults are eating mechanically, without appetite. Everyone feels drained in a way that goes beyond physical tiredness. That is not a food shortage problem, it is a flavor problem, and it is one of the most predictable and preventable failures in a poorly assembled pantry. Bouillon powder is the fix, and it's a remarkably powerful one for how inexpensive and lightweight it is. A small amount of bouillon powder transforms plain hot water into warm, savory, genuinely comforting broth, which is already a meaningful meal with essentially no effort or additional resources. It gives plain white rice a flavor foundation that makes the meal feel intentional rather than desperate. It turns red lentils into something that tastes like a real dish. It converts a can of mixed vegetables floating in liquid into a soup that someone might actually choose to eat. Flavor in a prolonged disruption is not a luxury. This is the insight that beginners consistently miss. Flavor is what keeps people eating consistently. People who keep eating consistently maintain their energy, their immune function, their cognitive clarity, and their emotional stability. A household where people are eating well, even from a limited pantry, functions more effectively and remains more cohesive than one where people are forcing food down reluctantly. Choose the flavor profile your household already knows and likes. Chicken bouillon, beef bouillon, vegetable broth powder, whichever one your family recognizes as tasting like home. A familiar smell rising from a pot in the kitchen when everything else about the situation feels unfamiliar does something genuinely important for people's emotional state that is hard to quantify, but very easy to feel. Keep a full sealed jar dedicated to the pantry. The open container you use daily in regular cooking doesn't count as backup. Those are two separate items serving two separate purposes. 5. Apple cider vinegar. This surprises most people when it shows up on a serious preparedness list. It sounds too specific, too wellness adjacent, too much like something from a health food blog rather than a practical emergency pantry. But what vinegar actually does in a sustained disruption scenario has nothing to do with wellness trends. It solves a very specific and predictable palatability problem. After several consecutive days of eating heavy, salty, starchy, protein-forward pantry food, everything begins to feel the same way in the mouth. Dense, thick, one-dimensional. There is nothing bright or acidic cutting through the heaviness. The body gets full, but the palate becomes increasingly fatigued. And a fatigued palate leads people to eat less, pick at their food, and feel worse overall, even when there is technically enough food available. A small splash of apple cider vinegar on a bowl of canned beans cuts immediately through that heaviness and lifts the whole flavor profile. It brightens canned vegetables that taste muddy and flat straight out of the can. It makes a stew feel less thick and one-dimensional. It adds a finishing layer to broth and sauces that makes them feel complete in a way they didn't before. A standard 16-ounce bottle contains roughly 32 tablespoons of vinegar. At 1 tablespoon per use, that's 32 individual meals where you can add real brightness and contrast without any additional cooking, any extra ingredients, or any extra preparation time. That is a remarkable practical return for one bottle that occupies essentially no shelf space and costs very little. The mistake is buying it without a specific plan for how it will be used. Think ahead before you buy. Which foods in your pantry tend to feel heavy or flat? Beans, almost always. Canned vegetables, frequently. Lentil stew that has thickened too much overnight? Yes, that's where vinegar belongs, and knowing that in advance means you'll actually use it when you need it, rather than leaving it untouched. 4. Dried mushrooms. This is the item that gets passed over most consistently. And the reason is straightforward. Most people simply don't cook with dried mushrooms in their everyday lives. They're not part of the standard American pantry routine the way canned goods, pasta, or rice are. They feel unfamiliar. They look like a specialty ingredient. So when people are assembling an emergency pantry, dried mushrooms almost never come to mind. But dried mushrooms do something that almost nothing else in a long-term disruption pantry can accomplish. They add genuine depth, not just additional flavor, actual depth. The kind of savory, complex, earthy, umami-rich quality that makes food feel properly cooked and intentionally made rather than assembled from stressed-out shelf ingredients under difficult circumstances. When you rehydrate even a small amount of dried mushrooms and add them to a pot of rice, red lentils, or broth, something perceptible shifts in the meal. It starts smelling like cooking rather than survival. It tastes like someone made a decision about what was being served, rather than just opening whatever was available. After several days of eating from a pantry where every meal was produced under pressure and time constraints without the usual range of ingredients, that shift in quality matters more than it might seem from the outside. A 1-ounce bag of dried mushrooms is physically small. It looks almost negligibly small compared to the other items on this list. But because the flavor is highly concentrated and only a small amount is needed per meal, that 1-ounce bag can meaningfully improve 10 to 15 separate pots of food. The shelf life, when stored sealed and kept dry, is very long, often years without significant quality loss. This is exactly what experienced preppers mean when they talk about addressing weak points in a system. The weak point isn't always a missing calorie source or a missing macronutrient. Sometimes the weak point is that every meal tastes flat and unmemorable, and people are slowly losing their appetite as a result. A small, inexpensive bag of dried mushrooms addresses that specific failure mode at essentially no cost in space or budget. 3. Baking soda. You very likely have baking soda in your kitchen right now. But here's the real question. Is it actually usable when you need it? If it has been sitting open in the refrigerator absorbing smells for the past several months, it is no longer at full leavening strength. If the box has been open in a humid kitchen for more than 6 months, it has likely weakened significantly. If it's nearly empty or has clumped from moisture exposure, you don't actually have functional baking soda in your pantry. You have a box that creates a false sense of having it covered. Baking soda earns its place in a disruption pantry because it gives the kitchen meaningful options beyond the standard rotation of rice, beans, soup, and pasta that most people's pantries produce. With flour, with oats, with cornmeal, and a small amount of baking soda, you can make simple flatbreads on a dry skillet. You can make quick-drop biscuits without yeast and without an oven if you have a covered pan and a heat source. You can make simple pancakes over a camp stove with minimal ingredients. That might sound like a minor convenience, but consider this carefully. After 5 or 6 consecutive days of eating soft, wet, stew-based, or grain-based meals, the simple act of eating something that was baked, something with a crust or a different physical texture, changes how the entire household relates to food. It breaks the sensory monotony that is quietly wearing people down. It makes a meal feel like a meal in a way that a bowl of porridge, however nutritious, simply doesn't after the 4th or 5th repetition. Baking soda also has practical uses in cooking beans. It doesn't replace soaking, but in certain preparation methods, it assists in softening tough bean skins and can shorten cooking time somewhat. It also has minor cleaning and deodorizing applications that can be useful when normal household supplies are running low. Keep a full, sealed, completely dedicated box for the pantry. Do not let it serve double duty as your refrigerator deodorizer and your emergency baking supply simultaneously. Those are 2 separate boxes serving 2 separate functions, and conflating them means you never fully have either. 2. Whole popcorn kernels. When most people think about emergency food, they think in terms of meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, proteins, carbohydrates, calories, basic nutrition. They think systematically and seriously about the 3 daily meals and consider themselves covered if those are addressed. What almost nobody thinks about is the time between meals. The mid-afternoon hours when the main meal is still being assembled. The early evening when dinner isn't ready yet and children are asking about food every 15 minutes. The moments when the kitchen is busy with something else and there's no easy answer to the question of what to eat right now. Snacks matter in a disruption. They matter particularly for children who have shorter cycles of hunger and less capacity to wait patiently. But they also matter for adults who are burning extra mental and emotional energy, managing an abnormal situation, and need something accessible and low effort between larger meals. Whole popcorn kernels fill this gap in a way that almost nothing else does. A small quantity of kernels produces a surprisingly large volume of finished popcorn. A single pound, which occupies barely any shelf space and costs very little, can produce many large bowls when popped. And there is something specific about popcorn as a food that reads as familiar, comfortable, and even genuinely enjoyable, rather than utilitarian or emergency adjacent. In a tense household where normalcy has been disrupted, a bowl of popcorn carries real emotional weight that a can of beans cannot replicate. It's a food that people associate with ordinary good times. That association is not trivial when everything else about the situation is reminding people that things are not normal. The critical distinction is whole kernels, not microwave popcorn. Microwave popcorn is completely useless without a functioning microwave, which you may not have. Whole kernels can be popped in any covered pot with a small amount of cooking oil. They work over a camp stove, over a gas burner, or over any reliable controlled heat source. They are flexible in a way that microwave-specific packaging is not. The only real maintenance requirement is keeping the kernels completely dry. Kernels that absorb moisture don't pop efficiently and produce unsatisfying dense results. A properly sealed airtight container in a consistently cool location is all the storage they need. 1. Honey, the item that does more than anyone expects. This is the one that surprises most people. Honey, it sounds too gentle, too sweet, too ordinary for the top position on a serious preparedness list. But follow the reasoning all the way through before moving on. Honey is one of the very few foods on the planet with a genuinely indefinite shelf life when stored correctly. Sealed in an airtight container, it does not expire in any practical sense. Archaeologists have found sealed honey in ancient Egyptian tombs, thousands of years old, that remained chemically edible. The low moisture content and natural antimicrobial compounds prevent the biological processes that cause spoilage in virtually every other food. That fact alone reframes how honey should be thought about as a pantry item. But the shelf life alone isn't why honey tops this list. It's the breadth of what honey actually does in a disruption pantry. Think carefully about everything a long disruption pantry tends to lack. Sweetness. Because sugar runs out quickly, and people typically forget to stock it in meaningful quantities. Immediate accessible energy that requires zero preparation. Honey is ready the moment the jar is open. A way to make medicine or supplements more tolerable for children who are already stressed and resistant, honey mixed into warm water is a genuinely effective and soothing drink. A way to restore palatability to foods that have become tiresome through repetition. A modest drizzle of honey over plain oats, over dry crackers, over a simple flatbread, immediately shifts how welcome that food feels.